What if you could lead more effectively and go home on time? Welcome to the Lightbulb. I'm Zoe Thompson, leadership and performance coach, and each week I bring you 3 practical insights from my work helping impact-driven leaders transform from reactive to intentional leadership so they can finish work on time and take guilt-free time off, creating success that feels as good as it looks. Let's jump in. Welcome back, episode 36, and in a complete shift from last week where I didn't have any one-to-one clients. This week has been all client work and a very busy week it has been too. So I have 3 light bulbs for you, and as always I'm just going to jump straight into it. So light bulb 1, let's talk about busyness. And what busyness means to you. And this has actually come up in a couple of different sessions this week, talking about busyness, talking about availability. So 2 clients this week, completely independently, said very similar versions of the same thing. One talked about working their best when they've got loads on, rather than sitting and waiting for things to happen. And that actually made me laugh because I've worked with this client for a little while, and ever since I've known them, they've been in a very busy, very demanding, pressured, high pace, pressured role. So I asked when was the last time they'd actually sat and done nothing. And funnily enough, they couldn't remember. For them as an individual, they thrive in that environment. The question from me was, how sustainable is that? And at what point does that tip so that it starts to impact the quality of the work that you are doing? Yes, it's great to have a high pressure environment. Yes, it's great that we thrive in that environment. However, when that tips out of balance, what is the risk? Does it impact the quality of the work that you do? Does it impact how you interact? Does it shift your leadership from responding and being intentional into being reactive? And the second client identified that they equate being involved with things going well. We explored this a little bit further. And as often is the case, it goes back to previous experiences. And I would love to know if this resonates with you too, because how often do we associate with being available, being accessible, and being involved to things going well? And so we then have a fear that if we are not involved, if we are not consulted, if we are not engaged in decisions that are made and we're left out of that decision, then things don't go so well. The conversation that I had with this client was that actually they like to be involved at the beginning because then they're bought into it. They're seeing through that process. Whereas if they're left out at the beginning and then they end up getting brought in because things aren't going well, they're coming into it from a very different place, very different mindset, and very different emotions attached to it. So their preference is that they are involved in things at the beginning, which also means they have a tendency to want to get involved in all of the things in case it doesn't go well, so that they're not brought in halfway through. And I hear this from a lot of leaders. They feel they are more in control when they are involved. Being available and being involved feels safe. There's an element of feeling in control with that. That means then for them, it's much harder for them to be hands off, take a step back, and give their teams that autonomy. Now, the gap here could be knowledge, could be skills, and could be action. So we need to explore, firstly, why is it we feel the need to want to step in? What is the fear that we have? And how can we reduce or mitigate that risk and support our teams to be able to develop the knowledge or the skills, or give them the opportunities to have those experiences so that it increases our confidence so that we can take that step back? Whilst these are 2 very different conversations, and whilst these are 2 different perspectives, this is reactive leadership, or this can be the difference between reactive leadership and intentional leadership. The first example of wanting to be busy and, again, getting involved, being busy, means that there is a risk of being reactive. And the second example is creating busyness because they are being reactive. We have to question whether or not being reactive as a leader is connecting our sense of worth on being needed and being evolved rather than being effective. It does look different when we are in leadership. Constant busyness, if it is not busyness with the right things for the role that we are in, is not a positive. And it's often evidence that our identity is still tied to being indispensable, to being involved, to being available and included. It's old habits. And they're habits that have served us very well in the past. They've definitely served a purpose. They are not helpful. And as we've talked about in the last episode, they are potentially a liability at the level that you are now at. So that question is, where is the balance between you being busy so that you are productive and you thrive in that environment versus when it tips over and it is no longer helping you to work in the best possible way? And the second reflection is to think, why are you getting involved? What is driving your involvement? And if you want to develop those on your team so that you don't feel a fear if you are not involved, what needs to be different? How can you support your teams to bridge that gap? Is it a knowledge gap, a skills gap, or an action gap? Okay, Lightbulb 2. This week, the workshop for the leadership community was on meetings, making meetings work. I did some research before the workshop, as I always do, looked at some data, looked at some statistics. Meetings are sucking up a lot of people's time. Harvard Business Research has shown that if we reduce the meetings that we have by 40%, it has a significant impact positively on autonomy, on well-being, on productivity. We need to make a conscious effort to reduce the number of meetings in calendars. Now, I know that that is not going to be new for any of you. I'm sure you're listening going, oh shit, Sherlock, like, tell us something that we don't know. We know that meetings are taking up a lot of space in people's calendars. They're not always effective, which means it's draining time, it's draining energy, and it's draining money from the organization of paying people to be in the room without it being effective. And that is a challenge. This light bulb links in with that first light bulb of being available, being involved, being included. And we need to challenge why we are in the room. We need to challenge the meetings that we are attending and making sure that we are in the rooms that we need to be in, and we are in the rooms where we need to be for the role that we are in. We can't accept meeting invites by default. We can't just assume that because we've been inviting, we need to be in the room. We need to run every invite through 3 questions. Include this information on your invites. It is going to make your meetings so much more effective. So here are the 3 questions. Why are we meeting? What is the purpose of the meeting itself? And what is the reason why they need you in the room? Why are these specific individuals being invited? Is it because they're a subject matter expert? Is it because they're a decision maker? Maybe it's something else. Secondly, what decisions need to be made? So again, the purpose of the meeting, what will the outcome need to be? And thirdly, what do people need to bring? They might need to bring answers. They might need to bring solutions. They might need to bring information that's going to help those decisions to be made. You need to know who's in the room and why, what the purpose of the meeting is, and what people need to bring. Being available in meetings needs to be intentional. Being in those rooms also needs to be intentional. If you are making yourself an easy option, you will be seen as an easy option. If you say yes to every meeting invite, you will be invited to every meeting. And every meeting that you accept by default is a decision you're making reactively. It's an unconscious decision. And the chances are, if you are not supposed to be in the room, you're going to resent your time being wasted, and you are going to resent the fact that they invited you to a meeting you did not need to be in. Whereas the ownership sits with you in saying yes to a meeting that you did not confirm you needed to be in. Again, the difference between reactive and intentional. The addition to this, if you are in the room when somebody else from your team would be better to be in there, they are missing the opportunity. So potentially de-skilling your team, not giving them the opportunity to have those experiences which will increase their confidence, increase their self-sufficiency, increase their resilience in being in that environment. You're wasting your time by being in there, and somebody else is missing out who really should be in the room. In the same way that we talk about you not being the first point of contact for questions from your team, you also need to check that you are not the first point of contact for meeting requests too. Use the 3 questions and make sure you know why you are going to be in the room so that you can make sure that you are well prepared to get the best out of that time of being in the room. Lightbulb 3. You may have heard of the term perimortem. It's something that is often used when people are planning a project or a period of change. It flips the question, will this work? And gets people talking about what would happen if it doesn't work. It goes to worst case scenario. And this was a technique I used with a client in a session this week. They had a decision to make. It's a tough decision, and they needed to weigh up different options. We walked around the benefits if they do, the benefits if they don't, the risks if they do, the risks if they don't, the pros and the cons. We looked at it through the lens of them as a business owner. We looked at the lens of the staff in the business and also the customers. We walked around the challenge and the different options from several different perspectives. And it was great to give them that space to be able to really think it through and talk it through. The perimortem question gave them the opportunity to roll the clock forward 12 months and think about the worst case scenario. What would be the worst possible situation for the business itself, for the leaders in the organization, the staff in the organization, and the customers? And then that helped them to think through, assuming the worst has already happened, to then reverse engineer the decision that needs to be made and looking at what's the worst that could happen and what would need to happen to prevent that from happening. Sometimes it's not lack of that stops us from making the decision. Decisions are both logical and emotional, and that makes it a challenge. There's the decision we want to make as an individual and the decision that we might need to make as a leader. And that's tough. That is tough. And I'm sure that many of you listening will have been in that situation where there's a part of you that you as an individual would love to make a different decision. You recognize that you as a leader, with the responsibility that you have and that accountability, you might need to make a decision that is difficult. Having the opportunity to walk around that and explore the different perspectives, look at what you know that's going to help you to make that decision, but also look at what you don't know that you need to know. And then the question of whether or not you will ever have those answers, because sometimes we can wait for that information and it doesn't come through and we still have to make that decision. Perimortem can really help with that, rolling the clock forward, shifting or flipping the question from what will happen if I do this to if this goes really wrong in 12 months' time, what did we fail to do? And that can often just flip the script of looking at it from a different perspective. Leadership is tough. We have to make difficult decisions as a leader. They're not always comfortable decisions as a leader. Sometimes they are a mix of the evidence that is there, but also we know as humans, we make emotional decisions. That's why I ask the question, what does your head say? What does your heart say? And what does your gut say? But also, we need to look at what the evidence says as well. And we need to make sure that there is an audit trail. As always, we need to make sure that what we are exploring is recorded, and what we are considering and what's on the table and off the table is all audited, so that if somebody asks us that question in 12 months' time, what did you consider? How did you reach this decision? We are able to show our workings out. We can talk them through what we considered and why, what we didn't consider and why, and the different lenses that we explored, the evidence that we had to be able to reach the decision that we made. And again, intentional leadership. It can be very easy sometimes to want to make the decisions based on our emotions and how we feel and how our staff feel, because they will also often feel quite strongly that we need to make a certain decision. We have to consider all of the factors, we have to look at the evidence, and we have to make the decisions that balance what is best for the business and best for the people that are in it. So those are the 3 light bulbs for this week. I would love to know what you pick out of those 3 and turn into next steps. Definitely a theme there around being more intentional and being more purposeful, which is what this is all about. So it's a good job that that is the common theme running through this week. Have a great week ahead, and I will be back next week with the next episode. And those are your 3 takeaways for this week. Before you go, ask yourself, what's my light bulb moment from this? And now that I know what I know, what will I do differently? Choose one action, however small, and commit to it. That's how overwhelmed and reactive becomes aligned and intentional. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next week on the next episode of The Lightbulb.